Welcome back. The world most of you know is very different from the only one my deaf mother has ever known. I grew up experiencing both, one loud and the other silent, both seemingly chaotic. Primarily raised by a single deaf mother, I often felt like I had to be her bridge between the two worlds. As a kid, I didn't fully understand how much that would shape my life, both as a child and later on as an adult. My dad didn't know sign language when they met at Bible college, but that didn't dissuade him. My dad was young when they married. He was 19, and my mom was in her mid-20s. I was born as Dad was finishing up, and he took a job as an associate pastor in Florida, the same town he was born and raised in. He would later become lead pastor. My parents' marriage ended when I was 4. Their divorce was finalized when I turned 6. My dad resigned from being a pastor after he had an affair with a married woman from our church. I vividly remember the day my dad stepped down from the pulpit. I was only 4, but the gravity of that moment stayed with me. Dad never returned to pastoring after that. Mom tried to save the marriage in seeking counseling, but Dad refused, telling her the marriage was a mistake. When my mom asked if we, my sister and I, were also a mistake, he said no, but insisted the marriage should never have happened. I always knew my dad loved us, even then. Mom would talk about the separation, but Dad didn't say much. When asked later in life, Dad admitted his mistakes, never denying what had happened. Mom later realized she shouldn't have disclosed so much when we were so young. After he left, we remained in the house in Florida before moving out of state in 1995. Being the oldest and now the man of the house, I felt like I had to step up and help my mom navigate the world. As a single deaf parent, she depended on me for things like phone calls, communicating with mechanics, even interpreting when guys asked her out for dates. It wasn't something I chose. I took on the responsibility because I had to. Once when I was around 8, my mom asked my sister and I what we wanted for dinner. "Pizza," we yelled. She then told me that if we were going to get pizza, I had to call and order it. I hit a breaking point. I was tired of being the one who always had to do things. Moments like these made me feel the weight of responsibilities I wasn't emotionally ready to carry. Looking back, I now realize that my mom absolutely could have managed on her own. She was incredibly resourceful. As a child, I didn't see that. In my mind, it was up to me to bridge the gap between her and the hearing world. Despite all the responsibility I felt, I still found a way to be a mischievous kid. After my mom would put us to bed, my friend and I would sneak out of the window to play in the yard on nights I had friends over, knowing she couldn't hear us. We'd laugh and run around, feeling like we had pulled off the perfect trick. The guilt eventually got to me. I remember going to my mom and confessing what we had been doing. Instead of getting angry or punishing me, she calmly said, "If you're out there at night and something happens and you scream for help, I can't hear you. Someone could take you and I wouldn't know that anything happened to you until morning." That shook me to my core. We never snuck out again after that. She was so wise. Those words stuck with me more than any punishment ever could. Every summer we would visit my grandparents in Canada, my mom driving thousands of miles with my sister and I in tow. On a couple of those trips, our car broke down. We were far from home, and I remember feeling scared. My mom showed courage and stayed calm, but was terrified internally. She couldn't hear or communicate easily with anyone who might stop to help, or be able to trust the people that offered help. As a kid, I didn't understand how she kept her composure, but looking back now, I see how strong in her faith and capable she was in situations where I felt powerless. Of the many awkward moments, I remember we were getting the car's oil changed, and the mechanic asked me to tell my mom he wanted to take her out to dinner. I remember thinking, the balls on this guy. I occasionally had ideations of misinterpreting, especially with what he said, but I never did. Even as a kid, I understood the ethics of my role as her interpreter. When my mom met JR, everything changed. He was different from the other men she had dated. He had a daughter of his own, and instead of using me or my sister to get to my mom, he made an effort to build a relationship with us, all while learning sign language. He was genuine. He cared. 6 months into their relationship, with a simple but sweet gesture, he proposed. JR started to take on many of the responsibilities I had carried for years as he continued learning sign language, and for the first time, an immense burden had been lifted. He was involved when I was learning to drive, but of course, my mom was also part of the process. She would correct me while I drove, signing instructions, which made it challenging. I'd say, "Don't yell at me," in sign language, "if you want me to keep my eyes on the road. I can't keep one eye on you and the other on the road at the same time." Those moments frustrated me, but looking back, I find it humorous. As an adult, I've had time to reflect on how growing up with a deaf parent shaped me. Watching Coda recently with my girlfriend, so many memories rushed back, and I broke down crying. The movie captured exactly how I felt growing up, torn between my own desires and my responsibilities to my family. Ruby, the main character, was stuck between her family and her dream of singing. For me, it was smaller moments, like just wanting to come home and eat pizza without having to call the order in myself. But the feeling was the same. I was always the bridge between two worlds, the hearing world and the deaf world. Coda hit me hard because it showed the dynamics so perfectly. Being the interpreter wasn't just about language. It was about navigating two cultures. When Ruby's parents realized they have to let her go, I could feel the weight of that scene. It's a different kind of letting go for deaf parents, especially when your child is the link to the hearing world. It was a similar realization I had growing up. My mom would be okay without me doing all that I did for her, but I didn't see that at the time. I thought my services were essential to her. As an alcoholic in recovery, I often wonder how much of my need to escape came from the weight I carried in my formative years. I didn't have the carefree childhood that other kids had. When I finally had the chance to let go of responsibility, I overcompensated. I spent my adult years avoiding responsibility at all costs because I felt like I was owed time to be carefree. As a result, I squandered so much of my life. I wasn't robbed of my childhood. It just came later. My period of immaturity showed up when it was time to be more responsible. I had my childhood as a young adult. My dad has remarried and had 2 more sons. My mom and JR have been married for 32 years. We've had our issues, everyone does, but we're stronger and closer today than ever. Sign language is still a huge part of our family. My brother-in-law, nieces and nephews learned it, and now my girlfriend is learning ASL because she wants to. It's a beautiful expression of love, not obligation. And it reminds me that even though I felt burdened as a child, the weight wasn't mine to carry alone. Looking back, I see that my mom never asked too much of me. I took it upon myself. And I realize now, things are never as big as they seem in the moment. The pizza ordering incident that caused my breakdown, it wasn't that serious. Sometimes the sky isn't falling. We just think it is. That was heavy, but beautiful. Thank you for watching Short Stories with Lola.